This Sunday on Capital Connection, 8 experts evaluate the graduated income tax. It's the biggest question on the ballot in Illinois this November and could alter the arc of the state's finances forever. 4 panels, 8 perspectives. We hear from business and labor, conservative and liberal, Republican and Democrat, women and people of color. In the first wide-ranging forum of its kind, we bring you the best arguments for and against abolishing the state's flat income tax to adopt a graduated rate structure, what it means, what's at stake, and what it would cost you. It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell. Illinois decides whether or not to adopt a graduated income tax rate structure and change the state's constitution to abolish a flat tax 1 week from Tuesday. We have 8 guests on 4 panels this week. You'll hear one guest arguing for the idea, the other against in each of those 4 panels. We begin with our elected officials. Representative Avery Bourne, a Republican, and Representative Carol Ammons, a Democrat, joining us remotely from Champaign. Representative Bourne, Illinois' financial woes are well documented. Pension debt is rising and eating into the state's available resources and spending. The state hovers above junk bond status even now, and the coronavirus, as you know, blew a massive hole in our budget as we have it. How would you describe the state's current economic situation?
I think that Illinois' economic situation is dire. I hear this from constituents often. Illinois is broke. And this is absolutely the last and worst time that Illinois should be proposing or pushing another income tax increase. We've seen that twice over the last decade, and we haven't seen a vast improvement in Illinois' economic conditions. So we have to have real structural changes and reforms that aren't an income tax increase, particularly during a pandemic.
Quickly, where would you cut now? Where is the biggest cut you would make in state spending?
I think it has to be an entire culture shift. We're looking at the biggest budget in state history. The 7% increase in this last budget, I mean, that's the first place to start. We can't have an increased budget in the biggest budget in state history during a pandemic. We have to spend the money that's coming in.
Representative Ammons, Governor Pritzker has ordered state agency heads to identify a range between 5 or 15% in cuts. When he was building his budget, he said 5. Then during the coronavirus, he raised that number and said, look for areas to cut. Some Republicans say that that's evidence enough right there that there is room to make cuts in state spending without raising taxes. How do you respond to that?
You know, what's interesting is that we kind of had a precursor to this idea that we could cut our way out of the budget deficit that we're experiencing. We saw that over 4 years of the Rauner administration, who did exactly that, attempted to cut departments to the bone, actually, where it hurt the people of Illinois gravely. And so what we know doesn't work is actually cutting our way out of this fiscal woes. What I agree with is that there needs to be a culture shift, and the fair tax is the process by which to get to that cultural shift. The millionaires and billionaires have to pay their fair share. So this idea that the middle class and the lower wage earners in the state of Illinois should carry the burden of these cuts that are being proposed, unfortunately, by those who understand and agree with the Rauner kind of idea, that you could cut your way out of this mess has been proven to be a false narrative, and it is the thing that is feeding the lies and the distortions around the fair tax.
Representative Ammons, if the graduated income tax raises $3.4 billion a year, where would you like to spend that money?
Oh, wow, what a great question. I would love to spend that money around education that is supposed to be the great equalizer, but because we've cut higher education for the last 20 years, we've not found that equal level of funding that would be necessary to fund higher education K through 12. And what I would love to see is preschool for all children. And so we're not going to get there by a flat tax means. We've seen that fail across the country. And we also know that the General Assembly, who could possibly raise taxes without the fair tax, so that's the truth. We could already raise taxes if we so chose, but that is not where we're trying to go. What we're trying to say to the people of Illinois is that it is about time that the millionaires and billionaires in our state who live on the Gold Coast, who don't have a worry about paying the increased motor fuel tax, they don't have to worry about increased cost of food or rent, they should help us level out not only the playing field, but they should pay their fair share so that we can provide the services necessary to the people of Illinois.
Representative Bourne, you expressed an interest in cutting taxes, but right now it's true. The state constitution prevents you from cutting taxes for everyone who makes less than, say, $100,000 a year. You don't have that option to cut those taxes. You'd have to cut everyone's at once. What's wrong with having that option?
You know, I think that it gets to the goal of what this amendment is. If this amendment's goal was to provide tax relief for Illinoisans, they could have baked that in. They could have put the rates in. They could have said that it has to have lower taxes on those under a certain income level, and it doesn't say that. There are ways right now that we have tax relief for those who are middle class. We have the earned income tax credit. We have other things in our tax code to give people who make less an advantage in the tax code. You know, it gets exactly as you said to the issue of trust. The goal of this amendment is to raise taxes. It's to bring in more revenue. It is to restructure it so it's easier for lawmakers to raise more income taxes, period. If this was about saving money for the middle class taxpayers, they could have done that in the amendment, and they chose not to.
All right, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. We have much more of this discussion and the full 4 panels with 8 guests up online. You can see that on our website. Representative Ammons joining us from Champaign, thank you for joining us. And Representative Bourne, thank you as well.
Thank you.
When we come back, top voices from business and labor, how the graduated income tax might impact workers and their employers. That's next.
I make sacrifices to keep a budget. Why can't Springfield politicians do the same thing? They keep raising income taxes and still have an $8 billion budget deficit. That's ridiculous. Vote no on the politicians' tax hike amendment.
Rescue workers face death every day, and far too often their families lose them while they're helping you on the road. When you see emergency lights flashing, you must slow down and move over to the far lane. That includes red, blue, and orange lights. If you hit someone on the road, you'll be charged with a felony. That means jail time. Help us keep our families safe when we're out helping yours. When the lights are flashing, use caution passing. Let's all go home safe tonight.
The average Joe had to wait weeks for COVID relief funds to keep their business afloat. But when your bro is a U.S. congressman, you don't wait at all. Rodney Davis's brother received over $1 million and didn't wait more than 2 days. Davis takes care of his special interest donors, too. So by now, we should know. Rodney Davis is always going to put his bros before average Joes. House Majority PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
With Long John Silver's $10 C-shares, you can choose from fish, chicken, fried shrimp, or grilled shrimp, and get enough for your crew to share. Each for just $10. Long John Silver's. Fish, yeah.
Hi, I'm Brad with Kramer Siding and Window. Have you ever walked into your backyard and thought, wow, I'd love to have a nice new deck or some sort of shade? Well, then give me a call to schedule your free consultation. Right now, we're offering 10% off sunrooms, decks, pergolas, patio covers, and 15% off retractable awnings. When it comes to shade, we got you covered. And remember, at Kramer, we don't just do a little of everything, we do a lot of everything.
Don't look good.
Yeah, it looks like it's both. Just what I don't need.
This is what you do need.
Complete the application within minutes, and if approved, you may get the money you need as soon as the same business day. Get the cash you need fast. Apply online today. Go to cashnetusa.com.
When a politician calls something fair, watch out. They say it's only a tax on the rich, but that's a bunch of crap. When that's not enough, they're coming after me next. Please vote no on the politician's tax hike amendment.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. We continue our discussion now with top voices from business and from labor. Joining us as one of our panelists here is Pat Devaney, the Secretary and Treasurer with the AFL-CIO, the largest conglomerate of trade unions in Illinois, and also Todd Meisch, the President and CEO of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, representing businesses all across our state. Why support a graduated income tax from the union perspective?
So, Mark, what we have in Illinois, and we've had it for decades, is an extremely unfair taxation process. For instance, the lowest 20% of workers pay double the amount that the top 1% pay as a proportion of percentage of their overall income. It's the illustration of a regressive taxation system. What the fair tax is creating a fairer approach. And yes, it's an approach that 97% of taxpayers will receive a tax cut. And if you make over $250,000, if you're fortunate enough to make over $250,000, we're going to ask you to pay a little bit more, only on the amount that you make over $250,000. What that's going to be able to do for workers, what that's going to be able to do for our state, is allow the state to invest in education, healthcare, infrastructure, social services, public safety, the things that are really lagging right now. And frankly, the things as we recover and try to emerge from this pandemic are really essential that we double down in our investment.
Governor Pritzker was a venture capitalist before becoming governor. We asked him earlier this week what effect this graduated income tax might have on that pursuit of businesses trying to get up off the ground if they have to pay a higher income, if they're starting to flourish and grow. What effect would that have? Here was his answer.
What I did before I became governor was actually work with small businesses. Here's what I know. The fair tax actually lowers taxes on more than 70% of small businesses. We want small businesses to thrive. They are the job creators in our economy. We want to make sure that the wealthiest people in the state are paying a fair tax rate that they ought to pay, which is a higher rate than people who are in the middle class, people who are trying to start businesses, people who are working class, working families should pay. In my opinion, people pay too much in taxes. Working families pay too much in taxes in this state. That's why we have proposed this fair tax. Lower taxes on the 97% of people who've been unfairly taxed too high, and ask those who are wealthiest to pay a little bit more.
Todd, you represent a lot of businesses in Illinois. What is that bottom line impact on businesses that are trying to grow or businesses that have already sort of arrived if they have to pay a higher corporate income tax or if their executives pay a higher personal income tax? What is the effect on the business climate?
Sure, the governor is a business person. He still has investments out there, but he also knows what New York Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo knows, and that is that you're raising taxes on some of the most mobile people on the globe. Cuomo said that about people leaving New York when taxes got too high. The governor also knows that, but he conveniently forgets it. And I think that it's very, very evident that some of the wealthiest folks are going to leave the state of Illinois. They're going to take their income and their tax dollars with them, and they're going to leave the tab for people who can't leave the state of Illinois, which is the middle class and on down. So I think the governor knows what the real problem is here. For some reason, he just doesn't address it.
And Pat, most workers in trade unions are in the middle class by nature. Will the AFL-CIO oppose any future tax hikes on the middle class?
Yeah, we've opposed tax hikes on the middle class, you know, for ages, and which is why we're supporting the fair tax now. We're supporting a taxation system that respects the middle class and the working poor that are aspiring to get into it. That's something that's very consistent with our history and what we'll continue to do in the future on behalf of the almost 1 million union workers that make up the Illinois AFL-CIO.
Todd, polling shows this very well could come down to the wire. There's a very real chance Governor Pritzker's biggest campaign promise fails. It's really on the fence here. If it does fail, the Pritzker administration has warned that one alternative could be raising taxes on everyone through the flat tax. How would that impact the economy?
Well, it's pretty astounding that because voters rejected a tax increase, the first thing the administration came back and said, well, then we're going to raise taxes. Pretty kind of astounding approach to that. What we would say is, again, remind everyone that this is just a bag full of cash left in the back door of the State House. No property tax relief, no pension reforms at all. No increases guaranteed for education. So this simply just gives the legislature a lot more money, and we just have to trust them they're going to spend it wisely. That's a recipe for disaster, I believe, and that's why I think a lot of voters are going to say, this is not for us. You got to come back and do better on spending restraint and growing the economy.
Pat and Todd, interesting conversation. Thank you both for joining us. We have much more of this conversation available up online. Next, the head of the Black Chamber of Commerce and the head of Women Employed, how the graduated income tax might impact economic opportunity in the workplace for women and minorities. That's next.
Carter's is having a fall home sale. Store-wide savings on our entire selection of sofas, chairs, bedrooms, dining rooms, and accessories. Plus, free delivery and 1-year free financing. The fall home sale now at Carter's Furniture Urbana.
After fire, water, mold, or storm damage to a property, Central Illinois knows who to call to get their lives back in order. They call Menold. Now that businesses are reopening, Menold is still here to help us all get safely back to normal. With Menold sanitizing and disinfection service, customers and employees will know that you're doing everything you can to stay safe. Consider Menold sanitizing and disinfection service and see if it's the right choice for you.
There's something rotten in Betsy Londrigan's campaign. Could be the fuel that powers it, Madigan-tainted lobbyist cash. Or the cash Londrigan's PAC raised with Madigan's political organization. Or the stink of corruption left by a probe into Londrigan's donor, a former Madigan henchman whose home was reportedly raided by the FBI. Betsy Londrigan's campaign is rotten to the core, a cog in the wheel of Madigan's machine. Congressional Leadership Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
You're a person, not a credit score. But sometimes your score gets in the way of the things you want to do. That's why personal consumer loans through NetCredit are designed to fit real people, like you. Borrow the amount you need, up to $10,000, and choose the repayment terms that work for you. With NetCredit, you may even be able to build your credit history as you repay. NetCredit, a more personal loan. Visit netcredit.com today.
Stay warm and cozy like these dogs this winter. Let your friends at Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing install a new Lennox home comfort system for you. We offer special financing and 0% interest for 60 months on all Lennox systems. Call us today and ask about all the ways we can help take care of the indoor air quality in your home. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend.
Carter's is having a fall home sale. Store-wide savings on our entire selection of sofas, chairs, bedrooms, dining rooms, and accessories. Plus, free delivery and 1-year free financing. The fall home sale now at Carter's Furniture Urbana.
Welcome back. Our third panel with us will explore how a graduated income tax might impact the economy, job creation, and income equality, especially during COVID-19, this pandemic, with so much uncertainty and people in unemployment in Illinois. Larry Ivory heads up the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce, and Sharita Ellens is the president and CEO of Women Employed. She joins us from Chicago. He joins us from Peoria. Thank you both for coming on. Sharita, I want to ask you first to evaluate for us what the impact of coronavirus has been on the workforce. We've seen reporting that women and people of color have been most predominantly impacted, not only by the virus itself, but by the job losses and the economic impact. Where is that? Do you have an update on where that is today?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question, because I do think that it's very important framing. And we know that since February that the women have experienced more than 6 million net job losses, which represents more than 50% of the net job losses since the beginning of this pandemic. And we also know that as of August, the unemployment rate for women had reached the same rates that they were since the Great Depression. And we also know that the majority of the women that are experiencing these job losses are Black and brown women, and predominantly in low-wage occupations.
So how does a graduated income tax help that?
Well, partly because it gives some immediate relief, and it relieves the burden from the income. So it directly puts money back into their households, and then over time it will allow them to begin to chip away at the income gap that we have across the country as well as in Illinois. We know that disproportionately low-income and middle-income families in Illinois pay a higher percentage or a higher share of their income goes to taxes than that of more wealthy families and wealthy individuals. So again, over time, that will begin to help to close the income gap.
Larry, this week, Governor Pritzker said 70% of small business owners would see a tax cut under this graduated income tax proposal. Wouldn't a little bit of that extra revenue or money in their pocket help them to grow their business?
Well, I think we have to be very careful in terms of what we say, because when you think about, this whole issue of the graduated tax, 4.95%, and then going from 4.95%, if you make over a certain amount of money, you're at above 7%. But then if you take a look at even under that, the savings that we're talking about to a business is so insignificant that it really makes no difference whatsoever. But what really does make a difference is, in my opinion, is that we're raising taxes in the middle of a pandemic. We're the only state in the United States that I'm aware of that is raising taxes in the middle of a pandemic.
Sharita, there was a recent study or a summary from the Civic Federation that said that they felt this rate structure, raising taxes from 4.95% up to 7.95% on the highest earners in Illinois, could entice tax avoidance behavior. Do you share that concern, and what does it say that people who make the most might be enticed to engage in tax avoidance behavior if the state implements a graduated income tax?
Okay, thank you. I also want to go back and kind of comment on some of the things that Larry said. Yes, there is a tax hike going to the wealthiest, but we are actually going to experience a tax cut for 97% of Illinoisans, period. And on those small businesses that will experience a tax hike, it is on the income that's above $250,000. So they will not be paying any more in taxes than their counterparts that also bring in income of $250,000 and higher. So it's important for people to understand that this is on income after. This is on their profit. This is after they pay their employees. This is after their expenses. This is considered pass-through income that then is taxed as personal income. So that's really important for people to understand that. And so when you think about offering tax cuts in a time of recession, what research and evidence have shown us is that it increases consumer spending, because lower in income families, when they have additional income, they spend that additional income. And when wealthier families are taxed at higher rates and their income may decrease a little bit, their spending does not change.
Larry and Sharita, a spirited discussion. I think we're going to have to leave it there. We have much more of our discussion and our panel up online. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
When we come back, the policy nerds dive in to analyze the pros, the cons, what a graduated income tax would mean for the state, for education, for property taxes. That analysis is next.
Better access to ambulances and emergency care.
More broadband for small towns.
And rural infrastructure for workers like me. Dick Durbin delivers.
In tough times, it's good to know we have a senator working for all of Illinois. Dick Durbin. He came through for our hospitals and frontline workers, stood up for our farmers and firefighters, and he's never forgotten where he comes from. Dick Durbin, a senator for times like these.
I'm Dick Durbin, and I approve this message.
When Congress passed coronavirus relief, Rodney Davis voted to keep the payments secret. Turns out Davis's brother was first in line for the money, getting over $1 million just 2 days after he could apply. Davis's big business donors got bailed out too. And just 2 weeks after Davis voted against added transparency, he got another big check from big business. It's no secret. Rodney Davis doesn't work for you. Women Vote is responsible for the content of this advertising.
My husband needed hearing aids, and he chose Belltone. So I thought, well, I'll give them a try, and I love them. Belltone ranks very high in service. They clean your hearing aids, and it's a monthly service, and anytime anything shows up, they take care of it. I don't think it could be any better. I'm very happy with Belltone.
Belltone, helping the world hear better.
CashNetUSA.com, man. I help when money's tight.
If approved, you may get the money you need as soon as the same business day. Get the cash you need fast. Apply online today. Go to CashNetUSA.com.
Money's on the way with CashNet USA.
When you need to know what the weather will be in the coming week, tune in to WCIA3's 7-day forecast. You can count on our team of meteorologists, Kevin Livey, Jack Gervin, and Amelia Henderson, for the most accurate 7-day forecast. Sponsored by Edelman.
We turn now to our fourth and final panel of guests. Ralph Martiri is with the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. Andrew Nelms is with Americans for Prosperity. We're going to get to you both. I want to start with you, Ralph. The CTBA says a graduated income tax would help eliminate some of the long-term structural flaws that have consistently made Illinois' overall tax system one of the most unfair and poorly performing in the nation. How would a graduated income tax solve that?
Yeah, so I mean, it all comes down to fundamental tax policy. So in addition to working at the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, I'm a professor at Roosevelt University. I actually teach a master's course on tax policy. And so the income tax, just like the other taxes, has a very specific role to play in your tax system. In the case of any state tax system, the income tax has two jobs, really. Job number one, offset the natural regressivity of every other tax and fee imposed at the state or local level. Literally, every other tax available to state and local government is regressive. It takes more of the income of a low or moderate earning family's earnings than it does out of a more affluent family. The only tax that can counter that by design would be the income tax, but not one with a flat rate. Because if you have a flat rate income tax, you leave that natural regressivity in place for every other tax and fee. So you need a graduated rate structure so you can intentionally shift some tax burden from low and moderate earning families to more affluent families.
Governor Pritzker earlier this week made the argument that if the state pays more share into local education, then local school districts would not feel that need to raise property taxes. Perhaps there would be property tax relief there. Do you buy that argument, Andrew? Do you see the possibility that more state funding for education could mean lower property taxes over the long haul?
Of course, we all want property tax relief, but simply hiking taxes in this manner in particular is not the way to go about it. The proponents, like Professor Martiri, talk about fairness and remedying regressivity. But first of all, there's already a lot of progressivity in the tax code. In fact, the bottom fifth of taxpayers pay a mere 1.5% of their income towards the state income tax. But the rates that the legislature passed and that would go into effect if this amendment were ratified have been called, quote, particularly ungenerous to the poorest Illinoisans, because under this rate schedule, you would pay on your very first dollar a mere 0.5% less than we currently pay in exchange for handing the legislature greater latitude to levy higher taxes. To me, sounds like a bad deal for middle-class families.
All right, I'm afraid we're out of time, but Ralph and Andrew, thank you for joining us with your perspective on the policy impact on the graduated income tax. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.
That does it for us this week. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll be right back here again next week, the last Sunday before the election. For Capital Connection, I'm Mark Maxwell.